and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to The Future is Female. This is the show where we find the extraordinary in every woman. I'm delighted to introduce my guest today, Lucy Lim. She is a freelance sign language interpreter. She's been doing the work. She's been working with the deaf community for almost 4 decades now. So it's a delight to have her here. Lucy, thank you for being on the show with me. I'm really curious how you got into sign language, how you decided to become a sign language interpreter, and why you chose to remain a freelance sign language interpreter.
Okay. There are two things here. Sign language and sign language interpreter are two different things.
Okay.
Unlike a chicken and egg, you must know sign language to become an interpreter. And I think for both, my journey with sign language and even as an interpreter, they found me.
Okay.
Rather than, you go and seek, oh, this is what I want. Yeah.
Okay.
So for knowing or to be in the sign language world or to learn sign language was because after SPM, we got 3 months gap. So my sister said, and I was supposed to look after my parents. My mom had cancer. So, we were preparing for me to be out of SPM to look after her. But she passed away in February doing the SPM thing. And my dad decided to follow suit. In November. So when I was doing my SPM, he did pass away during that period. So after that, it was like, I cook at home. I'm a peranakan, so cooking is very important to us. Then my sister said, Lucy, don't waste your time. Go and volunteer to this deaf center because they have asked for volunteers in the church. So I did. But then when you entered, it's not like volunteering in any other place. Everybody was signing. So what do? So you are the OKU, right?
Yeah, you are the one without the language.
Correct.
Yeah.
So grabs and open up. And working with the YMCA Kuala Lumpur at that time, and also volunteering my time, after working for some time, they had this partnership with the Alberta YMCA. So we were allowed, so-called, provided the opportunity to visit. And one of the places we visited was this college. And they were conducting an interpreter training program.
Okay.
A 1-year full-time. And I was like, was kaboom.
Okay.
I never knew that there is an interpreter training program because in all my years of working at the Y, I thought, if I'm working with the deaf, I should know how to sign. I should be able to interpret for seminars, workshops that we carried out for our deaf persons. And the words of our General Secretary then was, make your work as big as you want or as small as you want. Yeah, so that program was like, it was a wow.
Life-changing.
Correct.
Okay.
And all I heard was there are about 100 over participants from all across Canada who will apply, and they only picked the best of 15. So, I was like, I want to go in, I want. So I was advised to buy books, read up. So I went back, and that was in 1988. I went back to apply in 1992 and finally got in for 1994. But when I got in, I had so much of work to do. But my boss said, you cannot avoid, you have to go because of the eliteness of picking up.
It's too big an opportunity.
Correct, and you don't know whether they will pick you the second round if you apply.
Right.
So I had to force myself. And that was life-changing. I learned more about, you can become an interpreter without working with a deaf organization.
Okay.
You can become a professional. You learn the trade and you learn how to approach people to hire interpreters.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I think a lot of us need some educating on this front, particularly how sign language is used in Malaysia. What are the languages that are used in Malaysia? There are a few, right?
Actually, it's none.
Okay.
It's just Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia. That's something that our deaf community and Association of Sign Language and Deaf Studies are promoting the use of Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia.
Okay. Is that standard across Malaysia?
We mostly with adults, but the schools are doing BMKT, Bahasa Malaysia Kod Tangan, word to word verbatim,
I see.
Saya akan pergi, rather than kedai, saya pergi. That's BIM.
Okay.
But people say it's broken English or broken Bahasa.
So there are signs for words as opposed to spelling it out.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What about, how is it different from American Sign Language or international sign?
Okay. In all over the world, there are, I think, 300 over sign languages where every country has their own sign language. So Singapore has their own Singapore Sign Language, American is called American Sign Language, British Sign Language, BSL, Philippines and all that, okay? Some of this sign language has already been endorsed, accepted by the parliament as the third language of the country, but Malaysia, it has not, together with a lot of Asian countries. We've not been recognized. New Zealand and all that have that. So American Sign Language is very popular then, because as you can remember, in Malaysia, we had the volunteers from US. Now I forgot the name.
That's all right. Yes.
So then they introduced sign language. And then in Johor, they pick up some Shanghai Sign Language and all that. So all these were introduced in Malaysia because at that time, we were just doing BMKT and so forth.
I see. Does Bahasa Isyarat Malaysia, that's only for BM, right?
No.
Oh, okay, tell me.
Just like any other language, you can speak Cantonese, Mandarin, Indian, Tamil, Malay, English, but you can use BIM. So I was in the police station and this mother was speaking Tamil and scolding the son by using BIM. So I could follow the story, and then of course the police said, Lucy, mereka cakap apa Lucy? Oh, sebab, da. And so I could follow
How does that work though? How does sign language transcend all these different languages?
Because it is a language. Same like when you say shoes, kasut, all is the same sign. Emak, papa.
I see.
So it's just mama or papa or, house, language, pretty girl.
Okay. So I could be signing in Tamil and you would be able to understand even though you didn't speak Tamil?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But the interpreter needs to know these languages if you want to voice it.
Right.
So for me, it's a disadvantage because I don't speak Chinese.
Okay. So talk to me about that, because I think that's also curious. You are a hearing interpreter.
Correct.
Can you talk to me about the difference between a hearing interpreter and a deaf interpreter and speaking it out?
Or voicing
it out, sorry, yes. That's
so as the role of the interpreters, we do both.
Okay.
We do signing, and then when the deaf person wants to ask questions or present their viva or whatever, then you voice. Okay. But the deaf interpreter, we say, is an important asset in having the communication accessibility, especially if there are minors, like I say, in court cases, in the police case, because some of them who goes to the police station and all that are illiterate deaf.
What does that mean?
Illiterate means like they've never been to school.
Okay.
So their signing is a lot of home sign.
I see.
A lot of this kind of gesture. So when we put in the hearing interpreter, of course, we go by the book, right? The hearing interpreter will try to impress and do all the best sign. But the deaf person will be like...
Won't understand it.
So when we have a deaf interpreter there, the deaf interpreter would be able to express more and to give then they will be able to get that information. They tell it to the hearing interpreter and the hearing interpreter voice it to the officers and all that. So it's very essential when there's deaf programs like Deaf Olympics, World Federation of the Deaf events, our interpreters events, World Association of Sign Language Interpreters, that we have deaf interpreters. Okay. But we work it on a triangle. The speaker will speak in spoken English. The relay interpreter, or what we call the pivot, that means a hearing interpreter will listen. And then we'll feed it to the deaf person. So the deaf person taking that information will put it beautifully in so that the deaf people enjoy. I see that often in when COVID was happening. Yes. And not in Malaysia, but in other countries, when the person was the Prime Minister or the person in charge was talking about COVID, what is COVID, blah, blah, blah. The deaf person does a fantastic job in it.
Okay, I really like that triangle. I like the idea of the triangle. It really does take a lot of coordination.
Correct.
And that's part of your job, isn't it?
I do both. Completely solo, the hearing, and then I do pivot.
But also, part of their job is to organize that, to make sure
Correct.
that there is accessibility and inclusivity. Can we talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
In your career, how have you had to navigate some of the ignorances, if I
Right.
may, around sign language interpretation?
When we have requests from organizers that they want to do this, we'll ask them, okay, I said we have to be fair to you and also to my interpreters. Do you have a budget?
Okay.
Okay, and then how are you going to do it? Are you going to put picture in picture? Is it a physical event? Is it a Zoom event? If it's a Zoom, then you must spotlight the interpreter, because we don't want the deaf people to scroll and find the interpreter.
Oh, trying to look for it. Okay,
For the
understood.
interpreter. So you spotlight, and then but if it's a physical event, then we ask, are you now going to put webinar? Because after COVID, everybody wants to do
hybrid.
webinar.
Yes,
too. So they said yes. So I said, can you put us at the back so we don't disturb the speakers? And then you zoom us, and on the screen you put us in picture, and then we also tell them the size that we want. Okay. So the frame, it's 1/6 of the frame that you put us.
1/6. Okay.
What's the point of hiring us, paying us, and then you put kecil,
I cannot see,
yeah,
right?
you wear specs also cannot.
I think also maybe organizers or they don't understand the importance of making sure the hands are visual.
Correct.
So it's not just a check that you put on your checklist that I've got an interpreter on board. You need to make sure that it's accessible, that you can see, it's clear.
And I said, give me the notes.
In advance.
The speaker's notes, more if you're doing a UN thing, because some of the speakers come from India,
but you also
Myanmar.
can't get it wrong, can you?
Correct, yeah. You are live there. You cannot be saying,
Can't make a mistake.
Salah, you cannot. So
what happens if you do?
if it's in person, I have, some of the speakers got pauses, got gaps. And so I would say, you remember going back? So I just give the gist of it and then moved on from there. But if it's live on Zoom and all that, it's difficult. But if I know the deaf participants, I will send them a message and all that.
To say there was a mistake.
So you really, really cannot. And it's ongoing learning. So any interpreters, like if you are a seasoned interpreter, people say you are so professional and all that, the learning still goes on. Yeah, I still go back to books or notes when the organizers send to us. I spend time reading, I spend time comprehending.
Amazing.
And if I don't know, I will call people who are like, in a medical line. My sister is one. Gee, what do you mean by this? Then she will explain to me.
So you have to understand the context behind it to relay the message. Lucy, do all events, all webinars, all shows, should all of them have a sign language interpreter?
I think that's encouraged.
Okay.
Deaf people are not second-class citizens, and this I got from them, So we also have to treat fairly. And I don't see why, when you organize an international conference, you will make sure you got a Spanish spoken interpreter, you got a Chinese, you got Korean. Why the deaf people, you're not providing a sign language interpreter?
Right. It's like an afterthought sometimes, right?
Because we are also a language distributor or messenger and all that. So every conference I do, I always have to excuse me, are you going to provide sign language interpreter?
Well, I think if enough people point it out, it eventually becomes the norm, so it becomes a consideration. I'm really glad that...
Just like this event organizer that I mentioned, so first time he worked with me, he could understand, the need for communication accessibility, and he has put it on himself, on his own, to say, Lucy, don't worry. Every event I organize that companies ask me to do, I always say, I will put in a budget the sign language interpreter, and he prepares the equipment for me. Like he has the camera, the background, the lighting.
Well, I hope that anyone who's an event organizer or part of an organization will consider this the next time you put together an event. For broadcasts, Lucy, there's also the argument that, well, there's closed captions now, there's automatically generated subtitles.
Okay.
Would TV shows still require a sign language interpreter?
Okay, I asked you, if we go home tonight, watch your TV and if there's closed caption, how fast can you read?
Sometimes I'll have to stop and go back. You're right. I do have to rewind a bit.
You see, the deaf people have to see the movements of the lips and then read.
Right.
And what if their proficiency of English or Bahasa is not up to the mark?
I see.
You see? Because as we all know, education also affects the deaf person in all spheres.
Okay.
Like that's why they're in sekolah pendidikan khas and all that. And so they may not be proficient enough. Like I know some deaf people still call me Lucky, L-U-C-K-Y.
Okay.
Because, L-U-C-Y.
Lucy.
Yeah.
Lucky Lucy.
That's right. So they always have the K there because they see the word
I
lucky all the
see.
time. And so they may not have enough grammar and that to understand if it's closed caption.
You've worked with the deaf community for a long time. How have you seen inclusivity, communication accessibility, all of that evolve? And since you brought up education, I'm curious to know as well, has access to education improved in the time that you've been working with them?
When I first started working with them, 1985, and now I don't see deaf people having a college degree, a BA, master's, or never heard of a PhD.
Okay.
Right? But as times go by, I started the early intervention program. That means I work with babies when they're 1 year plus, 2 years.
Tell me more.
Oh, so we started this program based on what, remember Alberta YMCA has. Through this partnership, we noticed. So we felt that to capture or to excel deaf people is not to say start them from old, but what happens to the young ones. So we started the baby program. It's a one-to-one program. I'll go to the homes and teach the parents, teach the child and all that.
So if the child is born to hearing parents,
Yes.
you would teach how the
Correct.
family how to
Even if
communicate.
born to deaf parents,
Okay.
of course your work is 80% lighter, but to just give them the tips on educating their deaf child. So I've seen this group of deaf kids has now become teachers of the deaf, have all graduated from BA, in art. Yeah, and I have one who graduated with a PhD, the one and only PhD deaf student. Whoa, when I was doing his Viva and his
So
defense,
proud.
he had to wait for me because at that time I was working in Singapore for just a few years, So he said, my life was so difficult, you're not there. And not many interpreters like to do educational interpreting.
Okay.
Yeah, because of BA, masters, there are a lot of terminologies.
So in educational interpreting is just one of the areas, right? There are so many sectors. Do you
Correct.
need to be an expert in the field to know the context?
I would say one leg kick all.
Okay.
So you need to be good in legal, especially on Employment Act, because the companies will call you and then they will do that. At least you get some info. Medical, of course, and then education. So these are all the main ones. But there are some that's fun, like ROM, Registrar of Marriage.
I
Yeah, you
see.
need to put your job and signature.
Right.
So as an interpreter, you have to ask yourself, what is your forte? So some are good in seminars, conferences, job interviews. I don't take religion.
Okay. Well, in the US, even the Super Bowl recently, I see music concerts, they all have sign language interpreters now, which I find amazing. I hope we get there someday where we have sign language interpreters for our musical events as well. And that's an entire skill by itself, right? Because you have music to interpret music.
In the professionalism of interpreters, you can choose sometimes. Like some people do theatre work, some people do seminars, like I said, legal and all that. But those who are doing theatre work must enjoy doing theatre work. Because it's the rhythm of the body, the facial expression. Takkan, they're singing a happy song and here you are.
It's more than just the hands, isn't it?
It's the
entire
body, the facial expression, just for you to follow the rhythm.
Okay. The dream is to have sign language awareness, more people using sign language, but also the communication accessibility. So every event, every show, every possible permutation we can think of will have a sign language interpreter, but that means we need more sign language interpretation.
Correct. And there are no tertiary education here that provides an interpreter training program.
None.
None.
Okay.
That's why I had to, at that time, never heard of. So I had
to go
went
overseas.
Yes.
Okay.
But there are some deaf-related NGOs that are doing so-called diploma in sign language interpreting here in the Klang Valley. But again, you asked whether the validity or the whether they have accreditation and all that. So that's something that Jubim, the organization that I founded, Persatuan Jurubahasa and the Interpreters and Translators Association for Deaf Community, we hope to work on that, to approach tertiary education to take this up. But again, it's a chicken and egg. To do the interpreter training program, you need people who are skilled in sign language.
To teach it?
No, to learn the sign language.
Okay.
Yeah, like my classmates, they all had 2 years, 3 years of college work, just learning sign language.
So before you can
Correct,
learn the interpretation side.
So we said go for level 1 to level 3. At least you are more comfortable. And it's not just 6 months you can get it. You have to be comfortable will be 1.5 to 2 years.
Like any language, the proficiency is practice, right?
And language is ever evolving. Where last time we got the word COVID, where we have
what
the
is
word...
the sign for COVID?
COVID.
Okay.
And again, it's endorsed internationally, all used. Where do we have the, like when Mid Valley started, everybody was spelling Mid Valley, and then the deaf came up with this. You saw the logo or not?
Yes, I see.
And also the sign names for famous people like Michael Jackson.
Okay.
So sign language is ever evolving. Yeah, so you have to keep with the trend. You cannot say, I finished my sign language classes, I finished my interpreter training program, I'm like this, means big brains lah. You cannot, you go on and on and on.
Right. Well, Lucy, for the people watching tonight, what would you like them to know about, first of all, sign language, about the job of a sign language interpreter, the importance of that, and also the importance of communication accessibility? What would you like them to know?
Sure. I guess for me, communication accessibility is a big thing. And because I don't speak Chinese, so growing up, in a Peranakan family, everybody speaks Malay, English. I only learned English in 5 years old. I never go tadika. So when people speak to me English, you get so irritated, right? You cannot, he is there or she is there. I cannot come across. So I said, boleh cakap Melayu kah? And they say, huh? Isn't your name Lim
Lucy.
or Lucy? Yeah. I say, yeah, orang Melaka lah. Oh, okay, that. So, but how do deaf people tell other people?
Right.
So they always say this. And then the minute they say this, the hearing people will just like look down on you. Oh, cacat and
stigma,
all that.
right?
So for me, the communication accessibility is this. Once you can provide, deaf people can excel better than you and I. Like this guy, I say the first PhD student, he's got 2 master's degree.
Oh my goodness.
Linguistic and deaf studies.
Wow.
We who can hear, can see, can think.
Cannot accomplish that.
That's right. So if you can just have that, why not? And for children, regardless whether they are babies, hearing or deaf, I started my chuchus in sign language, like butterfly, mob. They really do well. Yeah, so some said it triggers your cognitive level. Of course, they're not deaf, they're hearing, but at that time when they're young, the speech sound is not there. Yeah. So sign language, I tell you, it's for everyone, just as you would learn English. Expose the kids or expose this. Sorry, one more?
Yeah, so we were talking about
what's the
communication.
role of the interpreter?
The importance of it. I think people tend to take it for granted or think of it as charity as opposed to a profession.
Correct.
Right.
Like organizations invite, oh Lucy, I can give 10 places for our company dinner, So I say, what about the interpreter? Oh, I thought you are coming because we are inviting your people. Like they call it a bundle kind of thing. So, but there are not many organizations who are willing to hire sign language interpreters because again the budget constraints, or they say I only have one deaf or two deaf and I have to pay, can't I give you a free meal or a dog gift, to such events. So if there are more opportunities where organizations, the government can open up to have an interpreter in hospitals, standby in hospitals, standby, in different places.
In
why
police
not?
stations.
Correct, why not? Then there'll be more young people who are very keen to pick up this as a career. Because, of course, now you said, what do you want to become? My mom asked me, become lawyer lah, doctor lah, teacher. But nobody says to become a sign language interpreter. It's like by accident, for the old people like us. So if we can have more, then of course the lives of the deaf people will be enriched. Right. And that's where the communication accessibility comes in.
Lucy, what a pleasure it's been talking to you, and also educational. Thank you for taking time to speak to me today. I appreciate it.
Right.
That was freelance sign language interpreter Lucy Lim. They're wrapping up this episode of The Future is Female. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
Melisa, this sign, I love you. Yeah.